Once, the rabbi's wife wanted to use her husband's golem to help her carry water from the river back to the house while she went out to prepare for Passover. She gave the golem 2 pails and instructed him to fill up the containers in the kitchen. But when she returned, the kitchen was flooded. She had neglected to tell the golem how much water and when to stop. Large, strong, and silent, the golem did exactly what he was told, and one must give precise instructions. Only her husband, the rabbi, knew how to turn him on and off, and only he was able to stop the golem before the entire house was flooded. The golem was made out of clay and mud, and on its forehead was the word emet, truth. In Hebrew, it is spelled Aleph Mem Tav, and if one were to erase the first letter, Aleph, it would spell Met, which means dead. And that is how the rabbi left him, laying dormant in the attic of the synagogue, and only someone steeped in the esoteric teachings of the hidden meaning behind the ancient words will know how to revive him again, lest he wreak havoc and unthinkingly knock down buildings and trees. He was created to protect the community from invaders, but a golem, unthinking and blindly obeying, is hard to control once activated. Thus goes the legend of the golem, which today can be found in modern books and films. In reality, Rabbi Yehuda Loew, the Maharal of Prague, was a well-respected and learned sage. His wife, Pearl, was equally as knowledgeable, and is said to have proofread all of her husband's many books and articles. In the city of Prague, today the capital of the Czech Republic, one can buy clay figurines of the golem at gift shops. The Altneu Shul, or Old New Synagogue, where the Maharal served the community over 400 years ago, is one of the oldest still active synagogues in Europe. My friend visited there and took a guided tour of this historic architectural gem, and he asked about the golem, which, according to legend, is still locked in the attic, laying dormant, waiting to be brought back to life. But the tour guide told him the attic was off limits to the public, and no one was allowed access, which only made my friend more suspicious that the legend must be true. Recently, my friend asked me to come over for a study session on the Maharal of Prague. I asked him if we were going to learn the esoteric secrets of how to create life and perhaps build a golem of our own. But instead, we read a fascinating discourse on the nature of man's relationship to God and the biblical commandments. Does one keep a Torah commandment because it is healthy or beneficial or makes sense, or does one keep it simply because it's a commandment decreed by God? And which is more meaningful, to follow a commandment because deep in your heart you think it's moral? What if you don't understand it? Will you still follow it? These are the existential questions posed by Rabbi Yehuda Loew, son of Bezalel of Prague. The Maharal was one of the most important rabbinic leaders of the 1500s. He was the author of such books as Gur Aryeh and Derech Chaim, which over 400 years later are still being studied. He became a leader of the Jewish community of Prague, founded the Chevra Kadisha Society, founded a school, and later became head rabbi of the main synagogue, the Altneu Shul. Rabbi Loew became known as Morenu Harav Loew, our teacher, Rabbi Loew, or Maharal. He was well respected by other rabbinic leaders and the Jewish community, and he befriended the famous astronomers of the day, Johannes Kepler and Tycho Brahe, and even had an audience with Rudolph II, who was Holy Roman Emperor, King of Hungary and Croatia, King of Bohemia, and Archduke of Austria. Emperor Rudolph was known for his tolerant views on the Jewish community and acceptance of religious minorities. The Altneu Shul is located in the Josefov neighborhood, or Jewish quarter of Prague, where Jewish people have lived since the 10th century. It replaced the old synagogue, but when newer synagogues were built, it became known as the Old New Synagogue. Completed in the year 1270, it is still in use today. The only time it was not used was during the Holocaust, and was one of the few synagogues the Nazis did not destroy. One tale says that a Gestapo agent attempted to enter the attic and died, perhaps because the golem was protecting it. Today, there is a statue of the Maharal erected in the early 1900s and a statue of the golem. But the tales of the golem did not actually come about until much after the Maharal. One such legend comes not from the Maharal, but from another famous rabbi, Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. No, not Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic movement, but an earlier historic figure who was chief rabbi of the city of Chelm in what is today Poland. Like the Maharal, he was a respected community leader, steeped in the knowledge of Kabbalah, Talmud, and Jewish tradition. The famous Rabbi Yaakov Emden relates the golem tales and writes, quote, Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem the Elder of blessed memory, who was a rabbinic judge in the holy community of Chelm in those days, created a man, and my father, Chacham Zvi, relates that this creature was mute and served as his servant. Seeing that his creation was becoming very strong and large, by means of the name written on a paper stuck to its forehead, Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem feared that it might do great harm, and that it might even destroy the world. He quickly overpowered it, and removed the parchment from its forehead. It fell to dust as it was, but it harmed its master. It scratched him on the face when he detached the name from it. A letter from 1674 tells a similar story about Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, but in this version, the creator is crushed to death upon removing the holy letters from the golem's forehead. This concept of the creation turning on its creator has been used in films and novels in more modern times. One of the most famous is the now classic 1915 film called The Golem, released in Germany. It's a black and white silent film, so popular it spawned 2 sequels. When I first heard about it, I thought that it would be a source of Jewish pride. A classic film predating horror icons such as Frankenstein and Dracula. However, a native German speaker told me he saw the Golem film as an example of anti-Semitism and a precursor of things to come in Germany. He saw the depiction of the rabbi pretty offensive, especially considering this was an actual historic figure. And speaking of historic figures, the grandson of Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, Rabbi Zvi Ashkenazi, who was born in the 1600s, wrote about the legend of his grandfather's golem, and he asked, can a golem count as one of the 10 men in a prayer minyan? If someone kills a golem, are they liable for murder? Such questions posed generations ago may become relevant in our modern world of robotics and artificial intelligence. In 1963, the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot began work on one of Israel's earliest computers. It was called the Golem of Rehovot, and like the Golem story, it was brought to life through Hebrew letters. The famous writer Gershon Sholem spoke at the unveiling of the Golem and stated, I dare say the old Kabbalists would have been glad to learn of this simplification of their own system. This is progress. Today, the Golem is on display at the Weizmann Institute, where it sits, silent and dormant. And the tales of the Golem, created by rabbis in days of yore, continue to pop up in comic books, video games, and films. And whether or not these learned European rabbis actually created a Golem, the study of their religious texts continues to this day. As does a community in Israel called Kerem Maharal. Named after the famous Maharal of Prague, it was founded by Holocaust refugees. The Czech Brigade was comprised of many Jewish soldiers who helped fight the Nazis. When Israel became independent from the British, they offered their services to their fellow Jews and a chance to escape what was becoming a communist country. Thus, the Czech Brigade joined the Israel Defense Force. In 1948, the area in northern Israel where Kerem Maharal was to be created was then used to attack Jewish communities. Several Jewish civilians were killed. Hostages were taken. The War of Independence was raging, and the area saw fierce fighting in what was called Operation Shoter. After the war was over in 1949, the Holocaust survivors from the Czech Brigade built Kerem Maharal, named after the famous rabbi. They created a dairy farm, grew vegetables, and built a school for developmentally disabled youth. This year, Kerem Maharal opened its schools to Israeli youth evacuated from the Gaza border communities. But that's a story for another time. This has been a moment in Jewish history. For questions or comments and past shows, you can visit benbresky.substack.com. Thank you to all the listeners, and Shalom.